Under the National Clean Investment Fund, called the NCIF, Climate United got $7 billion, which will support an affordable leasing program at the ports of Long Beach and LA. What? Battery heavy-duty trucks? How about you just use a gas truck? Oh, because they're going to save the planet with this program. Forgot.
They may disagree over Donald Trump, but they all agree that he must follow court rulings. To cross that Rubicon is a big no-no in the eyes of the American public.
Judge Chutkin is back. The same judge who ran roughshod over the American Constitution when she was prosecuting President Trump via Jack Smith in the District of Columbia is back in the case of the Climate United Fund versus Citibank. And of course, Citibank is the entity that has all of that government money that was handed out by Joe Biden via the EPA to the tune of, a couple $1 billion. And Stacey Abrams and her hack fund was supposed to get some of that money too. But now out of the District of Columbia, Judge Chutkin came out and in her 23-page opinion has issued the following. And you remember Tanya Chutkan. Here is her signing off on this. Tanya Chutkan with her digital signature that we've seen in many, many proceedings because she covered the January 6th case that was brought by Jack Smith against Trump. But she's out. She gives us some background. And as always, these are fun to read because we get to see the absolute cleansing of corruption that was exacted by Doge in these restatements of the fact. Political bloodbath. It says here, the judge writes, all right, these whiny babies, Climate United Funds and the Coalition for Green Capital and Power Forward Communities. Power Forward? All right, so PFC, all of these fake companies, in my opinion, are nonprofit financial institutions who in April 2024, they were awarded grant funding by the United EPA, okay? Lots of money. Under the National Clean Investment Fund, called the NCIF, Climate United got $7 billion. CGC, this other Coalition for Green Capital, they got $5 billion, and PFC was awarded $2 billion. And I think that PFC was Stacey Abrams. So the grant from the government for clean energy requires that the funds go to Citibank, and they're sitting on the money right now. So then on March 8th, March 12th, and March 14th, all these companies sued Citibank and Lee Zeldin, shout out to Lee, we appreciate your hard work there, Lee, over at the EPA, saying, what? They canceled our grants. They brought a variety of claims, due process, APA, Citibank. They say, give us our money. In mid-February, they went to go get their money. They went to the bank. They're like, sorry, we can't release it to you. They received little to no communication from Citibank and EPA. Hello, we tried to withdraw $1 billion today. We can't. Can you imagine this? On March 11th, EPA defendants transmitted notice of termination letters to the plaintiffs, indicating that the EPA was terminating their grants. You're cut off, Stacey. You don't get your billions. Go steal it from somewhere else. That same week, plaintiffs individually moved for a TRO. Okay, so all these climate planet savers, suing. The judge comes back out and says, let's see where this goes. Now, based on the oral arguments, so the judge says, okay, so they sued to stop this, give us our money back. There were oral arguments and the court finds that they win. Surprise. Judge Chutkin says, these so-called climate change green people are going to face irreparable harm, and so the TRO is granted, but a little bit more limited. So here's what she says. Congress passed and Biden signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which created massive amounts of inflation. They gave $27 billion to the EPA. Sick, right? So it's a congressional statute. Then in 2023, the EPA launched 3 grant competitions, $14 billion for the National Clean Investment Fund, geared at clean technology. All of these people were a part of it. They applied for grant funding and they got handed out our money. The grant awards were memorialized. There were agreements. There were terms and conditions in the agreements. And one question that we've had on all of these, why can they even be allowed to sue here? Okay, the fact that we're going into these contract disputes means they should go and file in the Court of Federal Claims over a canceled contract, not in this court. Other DC judges have found that. The terms and conditions specify that EPA may only terminate an award under 3 circumstances. If the EPA determines in its sole discretion that this would remedy this, oh, here you go, cancel for subsection 3, fraud, waste, and abuse. Termination of these requires credible evidence of a crime, right, is what these statutes say. It's just like, all right. So who's in control of that, right? Congress can dictate the execution of the executive branch and create these kind of independent agencies, right, that aren't real. But anyways, Chutkin says, under the relevant regulations, and let's see where this regulation came from. EPA, the terms and conditions, so their contract governs, and the contracts are referencing the Code of Federal Regulations as well. So waste, fraud, and abuse is defined with reference to the EPA general terms and conditions, which is not a statute, okay? And the Code of Federal Regulations, which is not a statute. That is a regulation regulation, which is not a statute signed into law. So then, right, U.S. code is generally signed into law. And then the code will say, well, you can go create, the agencies can create the regulations and then incorporate them. So she's referencing those things. Guess who's in control of the EPA? Trump, but I digress. She says, under the relevant regs, a federal award may be terminated if it also appeals under this code of federal regulation, if the award no longer effectuates the program's or agency priorities. Also good, right? That sounds like, oh, that's an easy standard to meet. Doesn't meet the goals or agencies. So we should be able to cancel $15 billion. Now, the EPA, though, must take certain procedural steps before it can terminate these. And again, look, she's referencing the Code of Federal Regulations. Under 2 CFR, EPA must provide written notice of termination that includes the reasons for the termination. So it's a notice thing. So again, Trump can't do this because he didn't fill out the right form and submit it to some bureaucrat. And the regulations apply to the EPA. The EPA helps to create the regulations, and Trump's in control of the EPA. And these are not created by Congress. I mean, generally speaking. Under the federal regulations titled Opportunities, right? Again, CFR. So it's not U.S. code. Okay. It's not USC. It's CFR. The agency must do all of these things. And she's using that as her authority, which is weak authority, to override the president and the Secretary of State and the EPA, Senate confirmed people. The CFR overrides the Senate confirmed EPA director. That's what she's saying. Under the grant agreements, plaintiffs' grants must be held at Citibank. Under the ACA, Citibank is designated to hold their money. So then Trump came in. Here she goes. Senate confirmed Lee Zeldin became the EPA administrator. On February 12th, he publicly announced they're going to take control over all the Inflation Reduction Act money that was stolen from America and didn't reduce inflation at all. Administrator Zeldin discussed the program on television. He said the entire scheme, in my opinion, is criminal. It is criminal. 1 week later, they issued a letter to the OIG requesting an investigation into this grift. Now, pursuant to the agreements, these so-called green people would periodically request disbursement of their funds through Citibank. And they asked for the money. Citibank's like, we don't have your money. During this time, EPA did not respond to their request, so they sent email. We want our money. Everyone's going to die. They're emailing you again. Do you want, you know what? I think it's lunchtime. Is it lunch? Yeah, let's go. So Climate United requested a smaller meeting for multiple people. They got no response. Emails go right to the autoresponder. Bye. It's canceled. We don't need to work with you anymore. And you don't want to also be communicating with criminals, criminal defendants, right, who are under investigation. So on March 4th, the Treasury Department instructed Citibank not to disperse any funds and said stop processing money. So then on March 8th, these Climate United green folks sued, saying with their declaration from the CEO, with our agreements, grant awards, all backed by, blue lawyers who will, be paid handsomely for this. A day before the hearing, the EPA, Zeldin, Trump, and others sent them identical letters saying, guess what? Oh, you're suing us, so your grants are now terminated. It's not just we're pausing anything, they're terminated, so you're done. Saying we've got substantial concerns about your program and you're canceled. So then they filed an opposition to the TRO. They sued, give us our money back. Chutkin is now here, and here's what she says. She says, first of all, Trump says that there is no jurisdiction over this. The Tucker Act says if it's a contract dispute, you should go file in the Court of Federal Claims. But what Chutkin says is, no, these aren't actually contract claims, It's about notice. So she's going to say it's constitutional. Plaintiffs sued Citibank after they didn't get their money. Now, they don't challenge a contract. They challenge an action. This judge is such a joke. They challenge an action. What was the action, Judge? A cancellation of the contract. She's so dumb. This court has jurisdiction over this because they took an action. They challenged an action, which was a termination of a contract. Moreover, they were awarded this grant, and as the Supreme Court has noted, it's a termination of a grant. The termination of these grants is in contravention to a statute. It's a contract. At bottom, they don't bring a simple breach of contract claim. No, they challenge adverse agency action. It's pathetic. What was the action, Judge? A cancellation of the contract. She says they neither seek money damages and they don't ask the court to interpret any terms of the contract. No, they're asking for specific enforcement of the contract, literally, to get them their money. It's not money damages like their house got blown down or something. They want the money that they were entitled under the contract. This is bizarre. They instead asked the court to determine whether the actions terminating the grant were reasonable and in compliance with the grant. It's like, I'm literally challenging not the canceled contract, but the signing of Lee that canceled the contract. He couldn't make that decision. It's fake. She knows what she's doing. A decision on that issue would enable them to avail themselves of other procedures, but this is not a contract dispute. They literally are fighting for money. Finally, Finally, cases have long been recognized that judicial remedy, a claim for money, just because it's about money doesn't mean that it is a contract dispute. Here, they're fighting for agency action, whatever. So mootness, they say it's also could be moot because they terminated their grants. No, Article 3 says this is a case in controversy. There is a live controversy, so it's not moot, and they're going to win in the end, says the judge. First, based on the record, it does not appear that they took the legally required steps necessary to terminate these grants, okay? So they didn't fill out the right forms. There was no evidence or basis to support their sudden terminations or that they followed proper procedures, which were all garbage procedures, which were regulations and which were not binding on the executive branch. Consequently, plaintiffs have shown a substantial likelihood of success, saying there were also terms and conditions that expressly limit the EPA to 3 possible grounds for termination. And their general terms do allow for unilateral termination under the awards, which again shall be consistent with the CFRs, regulations, not statutes. And so she's saying, to the extent authorized by law, explain how these cancellations are appropriate. And so though you did provide written notice, you didn't give them an opportunity to object. So you didn't go through the proper procedures when canceling these things. So you got to give them their money back. In their termination letters, you were too vague. You said there are ongoing investigations, but this is insufficient. So you may terminate agreements only if you do these things. You need credible evidence of actual fraud, and you haven't done that. And so as to individual plaintiffs, there are also conflicts. And at the March hearing, when asked why their grant was terminated, the EPA said it's based on information contained in the letter. But there was no evidence in the letter, right? So the judge says, I don't think your termination was valid. The judge is substituting Chutkin, her judgment, for their judgment. She might as well just install herself as the president. She thinks she is, as far as we can tell. Now, to be sure, agencies can decide to reevaluate their programs and may decide to end things, but they've got to do it appropriately. And they're going to be harmed. The Supreme Court has said that an injunction based on a possibility is not enough, but there's going to be real harm. They've shown without the release of their money, this judge, you mean the contract? You want the contract to be performed? Imminent harm is unavoidable. They finance their operations from this grant money. They pay employees, they pay rent, they fund projects. If Citibank transfers money out of these accounts, the funds will not be recoverable. That's the point. If we give them the money, we'll never get it back. In cases involving government expenditures, once the funds have been obligated, the court cannot reach them in order to award relief. Now, while ordinary economic injuries are normally insufficient, here, if they don't get their money, writes Chutkin, they're going to have no cash to pay their operating expenses, and they could all go away, which is the point, which is why these checks better take a long time to go out. For example, to date, Plaintiff Climate United has committed, listen to this garbage, $392 million to qualified projects, and they've already launched 3 financing projects. Here you go. 18 solar projects in Arkansas, which will probably produce no electricity at all. This is the largest solar deployment in Arkansas and is projected to save over $120 million in energy costs. Okay, Judge, guess what? We don't give a crap what your opinion is on the project. That's not your prerogative. It is canceled. And if people in Arkansas are unhappy about that, then they can speak out to their representatives and they can hold Trump and the executive branch politically accountable for that, because that is their decision. Lee Zeldin is the one who makes that decision and is accountable for that. You don't get to substitute your judgment for this and include this in your decision. Well, she is doing it, so I guess she does get the ability to do it for now. They also launched a program to establish affordable leasing options for battery electric heavy-duty trucks. And by the way, many of these things are just giant grifts for Democrats, right? They're like, well, we're going to help you install energy-efficient appliances. And they just go give a bunch of people, Democrats in blue neighborhoods, money for appliances and say, you're welcome, courtesy of Joe Biden. So here, leasing options for battery electric heavy-duty trucks to small fleets and independent contractors, which will support an affordable leasing program at the ports of Long Beach and LA. What? Battery heavy-duty trucks? How about you just use a gas truck? Oh, because they're going to save the planet with this program. Forgot. Committed $63 million in pre-construction financing for the design. $63 million for design? Not even building anything? Of solar power plants for partnership with tribal governments. Okay. And communities in Eastern Oregon and Idaho, bringing access to affordable energy in rural communities to indigenous people, creating 1,200 jobs and spurring local economic development. All of them should be canceled immediately. They were, not anymore. The judge also says, look, these are also imminent harms. We can't pay payroll. Oh, did judges accept lawsuits stopping lockdowns when people couldn't make their payrolls during COVID? No, they didn't. They said, sorry, get bent. Climate United has to defer compensation from certain employees to preserve its limited cash. Yeah, is that a basis for any injunction injunction to the gym owners who had to shut their buildings down, or to the restaurant owners who had to close up shop. Without a stable source of funding, Climate United will no longer be able to pay its employees. That's the point. Go get real jobs. Climate United, oh, they're not going to have dental benefits. Life insurance, it's expensive. Disability insurance for its employees or payroll, all that stuff. Yeah, what about the people who got thrown out of the military because they didn't want to take your jab? Furloughing people. They should be furloughed. And they've already given $392 million that's been committed. They're not going to be able to pay their rent. Too bad. They're not going to be able to pay their IT and more. Sorry. Should have, other funding other than the American taxpayer for all of your good work you're doing saving the planet. Continued failure to access the funds would prevent Climate United from its other commitments, and it would have to breach its commitments. So same thing as to PVC, PFC, Power Forward, that might be Abrams Group. They can't pay their people, and they've committed $539 million for affordable housing support, which of course is fake, goes to Democrats. So this judge is copying and pasting more, saying we have to pay our contractors. We got IT consultants. We have outstanding invoices. We're going to lose these services. We're going to have financial problems and blah, blah, blah. Again, the judge, we know that that is happening. The American people have made a decision to elect Trump and to confirm Lee Zeldin, and he's responsible for those consequences. Just because you think is going to be harmful for these certain plaintiffs doesn't mean it outweighs the public interest in this. And you don't get to substitute your judgment here. She says neither Citibank nor the EPA will suffer significant harm if we give them their money. Citibank already wanted to give them their money. And when the court asked the EPA to say, how come you're terminating this? They didn't give me good enough reasons, right? This is the judge. Well, they just said fraud, waste, and abuse. They said, sorry, that's too vague and unsubstantiated. So if you pay them, the fact that the American taxpayers will lose billions of dollars is not enough. Preserving the status quo does not make those funds unrecoverable. And so the public interest favors a TRO. So you got to give this money back. And so for the reasons stated herefore, the judge orders the following. Says the EPA and Citibank are enjoined from giving effect to the termination letter. So the canceled contracts and grants are back. The EPA is also enjoined from transmitting or taking action to implement the termination of the grants, and they got to get their money back. You are stopped and enjoined from moving or transferring their funds, and you shall file a status report by Monday, and also give us a status report by Wednesday. Signed by Judge Tanya Chutkan, the J6 judge who is very upset with President Trump and did everything humanly possible to try to imprison him before the election, raced her case forward, then tried to race it up and down the Supreme Court, and then published several giant dossiers to try to rig the election. She lost, and now she's getting her revenge. Trump and the EPA got to pay all of these grifting losers. Coalition for Green Capital, stealing money from America. Climate United Fund, stealing money from America. Power Forward Communities. Thieves, in my opinion, ripping off the American taxpayer, joining with Judge Tanya Chutkan to facilitate the theft. Now, they are unhappy with people like you and I who are unhappy with them stealing our money. Chuck Schumer is now mocking Americans who are watching billions of dollars go out to Democrats. They're not going to make any solar power plants in Arkansas. Are you kidding me? Here's what Schumer says to people who want to know where their money's going.
And you know what their attitude is? I made my money all by myself. How dare your government take my money from me? I don't want to pay taxes. Or I built my company with my bare hands. How dare your government tell me how I should treat my customers, the land and water that I own, or my employees. They hate government. Government's a barrier to people, a barrier to stop them from doing things. They want to destroy it. We are not letting them do it, and we're united.
Yikes. So Schumer is losing it, man. That is one of the worst things I've seen from a politician in recent memory. Mocking people. How dare you take my money? I built my business, and how dare you come in here and interfere with it? Shocking. Now, what they're trying to do here is ensnare Trump and impeachment trap, as we've been saying for a long time. And Harry Enton from CNN is reporting on what some of these numbers look like. Here's what he shared as it relates to this question is Trump or should Trump follow court orders? Okay, the answer to that question is always yes. Of course we follow court orders. We follow the law. So you would expect numbers to be high like this. And Trump is doing this, by the way. He is following court orders. They want him to get flagrant about it and say he's not following court orders, which is why Judge Boasberg is now throwing a hissy fit over the timeline over airplanes, because they're trying to catch Trump in a trap. They're trying to ensnare him in some violation so they can say, see, there's lawlessness. Impeach him. Here's what CNN is reporting on the numbers.
The American people do not want Trump to defy court rulings. All right?
He's not.
You rarely see numbers like this. Should
He's
Trump
not.
follow court rulings? Look at this. 84% of all adults, that's near uniformity in this day and age, you rarely ever see 92% of Democrats, 82% of independents, 79% of Republicans agree on anything. But they do agree on this. They may disagree over Donald Trump, but they all agree that he must follow court rulings. To cross that Rubicon is a big no-no in the eyes of the American public. When the court comes down with a ruling, the American public concurs with each other. That is, Donald Trump must follow those court rulings, even if he doesn't like them.
I mean, only dogs could get this kind of approval rating. This is incredibly telling.
This is Mother Teresa. Crosses the Mother Teresa line. She had about an 80% favorable rating when she passed.
Okay, so what do Americans think about whether or not he will defy or not defy a court? Where are they on that?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. They all pretty much agree that he should follow court rulings. But when it comes to whether he will follow court rulings, this is where there's big disagreement. Will Trump follow court rulings when the courts rule against him? Look at the majority number here.
He's doing it right
are
now.
Not confident that he will, compared to just 42% who are confident that he will. So I think this news that's come out over the past 48 hours, will he, won't he, of course says he will, but the idea that he wouldn't, that finds a home in the American public. That pretty much goes with what they think might very well happen, because 58% of the public is not confident that Trump will in fact follow court rulings.
All right, and so this is going to come down to a matter of interpretation, obviously. Trump is already saying he complied with the TRO in the deportation of the Tren de Aragua people, and the judge is going to come back out, and the plaintiffs are saying he did not comply with the TRO, right? So now it's going to be splitting hairs. You know, the plane was in the air after the order came down, so they were not on American soil anymore. We didn't send any more people after the order came down, so we were in compliance. The judge will say, that's not what I meant. So it's going to, at some point, come down to the left screaming, Trump's violating a court order, Trump probably adhering to, we did not violate a court order, and then it'll be a battle of who can win over the hearts and minds of Americans. Now, we also have people freaked about this. Even Murkowski is saying that Elon is going to come at me for fighting Doge and for supporting the left in protecting their grift and stopping these cuts from happening. Here was Lisa.
To compromise my own issue, a better Republican. And if you're not, get out of the party. You know what? Until Alaskans tell me, Lisa, it's just not working anymore.
Hopefully they do so.
I am going to give you every last breath that I have, and I'm going to try to solve every little problem. And I'm not going to compromise my own integrity.
What integrity?
By hiding from my words when I feel they need to be spoken. I'm going to take the criticism that comes, and it may be that Elon Musk has decided he's going to take the next $1 billion that he makes off of Starlink and put it directly against Lisa Murkowski.
I hope so. Yeah,
and you know what? That may happen.
Good.
But I'm not giving up 1 minute, one opportunity to try to stand up for Alaskans. But I got to figure out how to do that, and I need Alaskans' help to tell me what they're feeling.
Oh, well, what if they're supporting Elon and Trump and they would like you to do that too?
So that I can help deal with that. You know, I don't mean to be critical of you. You and I, we can spar at these things, and I actually like the engagements. It kind of reminds me back in the days of Bob DeKoch.
All right, Lisa, we've had enough. So she's yucking it up with Lord knows who, answering questions and sparring on these tough issues, and she's freaked out about Elon coming after her. Is she a Republican? What side is she on? I don't think she is a Republican. She just pretends to be. Now, we've got other people who are now going to be investigating a lot of the Democrat grift and graft, including our friends Gary Shapley and Ziegler, Joseph Ziegler, over at the Treasury Department. And we've spoken with their attorneys, two amazing individuals, Jason Foster and Tristan Levitt. You know who they are over at Empower Oversight. And they've been on the channel a couple of times. Shout out to those dudes. And these two individuals on a tremendous victory because they have now been promoted. Remember, they were instrumental in exposing the Hunter Biden laptop and criminal cover-up that was being, in my opinion, enacted by the DOJ, warning Hunter's lawyers about search warrants of his storage facilities and other things. It was ridiculous. But these guys got castigated and abused by the government. Now they're back in charge to go and hopefully investigate a lot of this fraud, this EPA fraud, this Inflation Reduction Act fraud, and more, and get to the bottom of it. Here was Joseph Ziegler over on with Fox explaining what is happening in his world.
So what I saw over the last 6 years, the bureaucratic nonsense and mess under the Biden administration was, I never thought in my 15 years in government service that I would ever see something like that. And after witnessing that, I fully support what this administration is trying to do. I fully support what the secretary is trying to do. And I hope that through Gary and I working closely with Secretary Bessent, that we can make recommendations to him that will make the IRS more fair. It will make it more effective, and it will make it more efficient. And that, at the end of the day, benefits every single taxpayer out there, regardless if you are a Democrat or a Republican.
Amazing. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of there, because there's a lot of money that is still being ordered out of the Treasury Department by Judge Tanya Chutkan, saying that Stacey Abrams and all the Green Democrats should be getting billions of dollars more. Of course, we know Trump is going to be appealing this one. We'll be here covering it when he does. Thank you for subscribing and joining us as we do.